Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now this is an RTX 2080 Super and I've wanted one ever since it was released in July 2019. In all honesty, what I really wanted was a Founders Edition card. I mean, they look fantastic, but what I ended up with was this blower style PNY card, a card that was cheaper than any other version on eBay. As you can imagine, buying the cheapest 2080 Super in 2022 doesn't mean that it was actually cheap. Although listed at £575, I ended up paying £546 thanks to a promotional code. And yes, I'd like to reiterate that at the time of purchase, this was the lowest cost card available to buy. It's hard to get too excited about the money I saved, but on a more positive note, it did cost less than its 2.5-year-old recommended retail price, which certainly can't be said for every high-end offering at the moment. As a blower card, it's probably a bit noisier than other variants, and it's likely to run a bit warmer, but it's this style that meant it was a bit cheaper. I can't seem to find any other videos on this specific model, nor have I read any written reviews. It doesn't even exist on the Tech Power Up GPU-Z database either, at least it didn't at the time of recording, but I did submit a validation, so it might do by the time you're watching this. In terms of specifications, we have 8 gigs of GDDR6, 3072 CUDA cores, a 1650 MHz core clock, and an 1815 MHz boost clock. These speeds match those of a reference card. I have noticed that this one often exceeds 1900 MHz in games. Unlike usual, I don't plan to test this and then sell it on straight away. I recently found a good deal on a 1440p monitor, and there are a few CPU videos in the works, so I need something a bit beefier to stick in the test bench for a while. These factors, in combination with my unhealthy need to collect blower style cards, meant that I couldn't resist. Today we'll be seeing how this seemingly uncommon PNY GPU performs at 1440p in a handful of the latest games to see how it's holding up. To kick things off, I started with an older title, but one that still looks fantastic at ultra settings. This is The Witcher 3. Now, any game of a similar age isn't going to give the 2080 Super much trouble. In fact, running this at 4K resolution would be more than playable with this card. It's nice to throw a slightly older game into the mix, especially one as visually impressive and sometimes intensive as this, for some perspective, I guess. The 0.1% low figure was quite low, but I do tend to experience dips here and there in busier areas in The Witcher 3. Perhaps it's CPU related. When the 2080 Super came out, a few sites focused heavily on 2160 performance, but I very much think this is a solid 1440p card these days, which hopefully I can demonstrate going forward. As you can see though, it is working and not getting too warm under load as of yet. It's warmer than you'd see from a dual fan card, but I'm relatively happy, all the while it stays under 80 degrees. This is how the card sounds as well at these temperatures on my test bench. In Battlefield 2042, the 2080 Super clocks in at around 1890 MHz and sits at less than 75 degrees at 1440p. In my opinion, ultra settings aren't worth it in most games unless you can utilise them comfortably with plenty of breathing room. I guess it also depends on whether the visual differences are worth it for the frame rate sacrifice. Here the 2080 Super holds its own yet again at a native 2560 by 1440. Battlefield 2042 certainly divides opinions, and some of you ask me to include Battlefield 5 instead, but this at the moment is my go-to evening game. When I relax and I don't really want to think too much, I fire up Battlefield, so it's nice to know that I can do at 1440p with decent visual quality. Speaking of visuals, Cyberpunk 2077 looks fantastic. It looks decent enough at low settings, to be honest, so the high preset with high textures and crowd density really makes it stand out. Again, the card is clocking in at just under 1900 MHz with a low temperature of 74 degrees maximum here. I wouldn't call this annoyingly loud either. It is noticeable, and it's certainly not as quiet as the 1080 Ti Founders Edition I used to own, but it can certainly be drowned out with game noise, and if you have a headset, even better. I think the fact that the fan doesn't stop under load either helps a little bit. Because this card is never completely silent, the increase in fan speed under load doesn't seem to be as noticeable. It doesn't go from nothing to thunder screech, it goes from petrol lawnmower to Boeing 737. I'm kidding, it's not really too bad at all. Now I know I said before about not using ultra settings, but Far Cry 6 defaulted to this, so I thought why not? Here the card hit 1905 MHz, but it sat at less than 70 degrees most of the time. These tests were undertaken at 1440p of course, so 1080p is going to put even less stress on the card. Now to be honest, I haven't played much of Far Cry 6. As you can see, I'm still on the first island. I got a bit further on the PS5 version, but I sort of just stopped playing. I don't really know why, because it's pretty fun and runs quite well on a wide range of hardware. It also supports FSR, which is handy for older or lower end GPUs. Forza Horizon 5 runs incredibly well, but I'd expect nothing else. This is one of the most well optimised games from recent years, and as such it runs smoothly on a huge range of hardware. Again, we're at less than 70 degrees for the temperature, but remember that my test system sits on top of my desk and not in a case. I've also got no system fans pointing at the card or drawing air away from it, but I do however live in England where the temperature is usually freezing cold. Just my luck that I've bought a blower graphics card during one of the warmest Februaries ever. Still, it's important not to be immediately put off by cards like this, but it is important to read reviews and pay attention to what people have to say regarding noise levels and temperatures. San Andreas, the definitive edition next with the high preset. The street and vehicle lighting quality was turned down, and tweaks to shadow quality would also benefit the card here, but I left things at default aside from the lighting settings. I include this game because I like playing it and it's unpredictable in its performance, at least in my experience, so it's good to document how it reacts to certain hardware. Not too many issues here, aside from the usual inconsistent frame times. Time for a big team battle in Halo Infinite now, and there were no real issues here. I want to explain the 0.1% low figure. It didn't actually turn out as low as I thought it would, but I did notice a brief sort of micro freeze whenever I got wiped out by another player. This issue can be avoided if you're, well, better at the game than I am, but in all seriousness this only happened a couple of times that I got killed, but I thought it was worth mentioning anyway. Apart from that, Halo Infinite on the 2080 Super runs nicely at 1440p resolution. Finally, it's Red Dead Redemption 2. I usually go straight for the console equivalent settings, but today I opted for high across the board, with the exception of ultra textures. All the in-game sliders like water physics quality, geometry detail, etc. were all set to their respective highest, apart from TAA sharpening, which was completely off as a personal preference. The game ran very well and looks excellent. It's been out on PC a while, but it's still very visually impressive and can cause some problems for even the highest end graphics cards with increased quality settings. I guess this video served as an introduction to my new daily card, for now anyway, as well as an insight into what this thing is capable of in modern titles. I hope it also helps some of you decide if you would buy a blower card or not, although they are of course all different, so just be sure to look into reviews and be certain that you're not going to have a portable barbecue on your hands. Thank you very much for watching then. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like down below. Leave a dislike if you didn't. Let me know what you think of this blower style 2080 Super in the comments. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.